So this weekend we're starting on a project on my 2006 Toyota Tacoma. The main problem I'm having is, you can see right in there, my axle. The CV boot is torn and slinging grease all over the place. While I'm in here, I'm also going to be replacing the outer tie rod, because it's original and it's a little worn out and cracked. And my spindle, I was off-roading a couple months ago and decided that it'd be cool to bend the spindle, so I'll be replacing the spindle as well as welding on some Total Chaos spindle gussets to make them a little stronger. So we're gonna start by just getting the disc and the caliper off. You don't need to do this if you're just doing the axle, but because I have to get to the spindle, it's gonna make it a lot easier if I can get this 15 pounds of caliper and disc off. And then we'll go and take the cap off, and underneath this cap is the axle nut, and after that we'll pop the ball joint, and then we can swing the whole assembly up and knock the axle out from the inboard side. Okay, so to get this caliper off, you gotta get rid of this bolt here and this one down there, and then a hanger pre-wired up here so we can catch it so it doesn't yank any of the caliper lines. And it would be a good idea to remove this bolt as well, so that it just gives you more slack on that line there. So this guy's a 12mm. Get this off. It's going pretty easily. I PB blasted all this stuff yesterday, so hopefully it won't be too much of a pain to get everything off. So now this caliper should come right off and hang it there. Next, you're going to remove the rotor here. This one doesn't have a jacking screw. I think the factory ones have jacking screws in them to help you pry it off, but this is not original anymore. So I gotta beat it off with a mallet. Next, we need to gain access to the axle nut to obviously remove the axle, CV axle, out of here. So this is just a little dust cap. What you don't want to do is take a screwdriver, just kind of tap it in here, tap it in there, all the way around. You want to be careful not to damage this thing, because you got to get it back on. It's kind of like a press fit. So take your time on it, and then it'll reveal the axle nut underneath. There's the cap, and here's the axle nut with cotter pin in there. So next you're going to remove the cotter pin and a little locking cap, and then the nut. Okay, to get this nut off, you might need to be a little resourceful, but it takes a 1 3/8 socket. An impact should get it off. You might need to use a breaker bar, but basically nothing's holding, unless you have 4-wheel drive engaged and the other wheel on the ground, nothing's keeping this thing from spinning. So as soon as you take the impact to it, it's just going to want to spin it instead of removing the nut. So I use this piece of I-beam I had laying around, and just want to kind of block it like that, so that when it turns, it just turns into the I-beam instead. Just like that. So next we're going to get rid of the outer tie rod. It's just got another cotter pin, a nut, and then since I'm not keeping this, I'm just going to use a pickle fork and get it out of here. If you're planning on reusing this, I would go rent a little ball joint separator from O'Reilly's or whatever, and that way you don't damage your boot. But since mine is already toast, I don't really care about it. We got the ball joint out of the way here. I'm going to remove the bottom of the knuckle. So basically it's this bolt and then one right over here. It's the same size. So that unbolts from the spindle. After we get that, the whole wheel hub assembly should be able to rotate up and you can pop your axle out. That came out really easily. Now you should be able to swing the whole unit out and pull that axle out. You might need to tap on it a little bit. Kind of help it through. Like that. So that's the outer axle. It's out. Next, we're gonna go work underneath up in there and just pry the inner axle out, and the whole thing will fall right up. Okay, so to do this the easy way, actually gonna need to remove this skid plate, the transmission skid, because you can't really get up in there to pry that out with the skid in the way. So it's got 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts, and the thing will pop right down. Okay, so next what you're going to want to do, I'm using the same pickle fork I used for the ball joint, but you want to kind of stick it right up in there. I can't do it with the camera here, but stick it up in there and give it a couple whacks here, and it should start to separate from the third member there. And then you can just pull the whole thing right out. And it's coming right out now. And you want to make sure you have something to catch fluid with if you haven't already drained your differential, which I don't. There it goes. And there you have your axle.